Greetings. My name is Braus. I am Associate Professor of Music History at the Hart School. And I'm here to tell you about a rather interesting event that will be happening at the school next week. The title of the event is Reger to the Max. And I'll be assisted by two graduate students in clarinet, Sarom Kim and Diego Vasquez, who you will meet shortly. The title of this concert plays on the name Max Reger, a German composer who lived from 1873 to 1916. During his short life of 43 years, he composed about 1,000 pieces of music and performed as an organist and conductor and pianist over 150 concerts a year. And if that weren't enough, he taught composition at 2 major European universities. You can understand why he expired so early. In the years before World War I, he was among the most controversial composers in Europe, and there were plenty of them, believe me. Igor Stravinsky found Reger both repulsive as a composer and as a man. But Paul Hindemith called him the last giant of music and said that he, Paul Hindemith, learned more about composition from Reger than he did from J.S. Bach. As you probably can imagine, Reger's music came under constant attack from the critics, who tended to be rather conservative at this time. But he had replied to them. He said to one critic, rather famously, "Dear sir, I am sitting in the smallest room of my house. Your review is before me. Shortly it shall be behind me. Sincerely, Max Reger." What makes Reger's music so difficult to understand for many people? The easy answer is that his music outwardly resembles that of other composers, primarily the music of Bach and Braus. And some people think that his music really lacks originality. But the more interesting answer is that his music builds on the most complicated and mature aspects of these composers' music, aspects that we normally don't think about when we think about Bach and Brahms. Take Bach, for example. According to Reger, Bach was the composer who could save German music. And what he meant by that is that around the year 1900, when Reger was hitting his stride as a composer, he felt that there were too many symphonic poems and not enough symphonies. Of course, he was referring to people like Richard Strauss. And Reger said, quote, in translation, of course, "Every morning when I wake up, I bathe in the steely waters of the universal father Bach." He was not joking when he said that, because he modeled many of his works on the same types of genres as Johann Sebastian Bach. Can you imagine a composer in 1900 writing, shall we say, chorale fantasias based on Lutheran hymns, or unaccompanied suites for cello, or even cantatas using the same hymn tunes that Bach used almost 200 years earlier? However, he was the composer of his time, and he did write sonatas for clarinet and piano, as you're going to hear. And he did write cycles of piano pieces, very much following the tradition of Schumann and Brahms. One such set of pieces contains a piece that is kind of a direct homage to Bach, and that piece is called Gavotte. A gavotte, as many of you know, is a Baroque dance. It's a rather lively dance. And Reger put his own spin on this, his 1910 spin on this gavotte, in the piece I'm about to demonstrate. There are two things you have to know about a gavotte to appreciate how Reger put his own signature on this music. One is that it's a lively dance with a double upbeat. The second thing about a gavotte is that it usually is accompanied by a second gavotte, sometimes known as a musette. Here is an example of a gavotte by Bach from one of his keyboard suites. And you can probably hear the double upbeat. 2 and 1. the second gavotte of the musette, we hear this. Now you know that you hear that this gavotte is much different in character from the first gavotte. First of all, it's in major as opposed to minor. Instead of this, we hear this. But we also have a much different bass line. In the first gavotte, we have this kind of walking bass. But in this piece, we have just a single note that just sustains. And that is called a pedal point, and is a sound that we associate very often with bagpipes, which is the English translation of the word musette. It's the harmony, the bass stays the same, but the harmonies and melodies change above that. Now, in Reger's gavotte, what he does is he keeps that double upbeat, but he exaggerates so much that we can barely distinguish the upbeat from the downbeat. That's the upbeat, and this is the downbeat. And in the musette section of this piece, instead of having a single note that is sustained for the entire piece, what Reger does is he takes that bass note, which happens to be F, and he builds two additional pedal points above that, each a fifth apart. It sounds almost like a drone on a big Scots bagpipe. Well, Reger doesn't hold out all those three notes at the one time. What he does is he combines that with the gavotte rhythm. 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. And above that, he has a melody that goes like this. Strange for a gavotte, isn't it? Well, it's not that strange if you know some of Bach's really chromatic music. For example, here's a piece by Bach, a section of a piece called the Chromatic Fantasy in Fugue, which goes like this. Stuff, isn't it? And Reger knew this, and he once said, Johann Sebastian Bach, you're very lucky that you're dead, because if you were alive in the year 1900, the critics would probably attack you also. Okay, now, what I want to do is show you certain relationships between Brahms's music and Reger's music. Reger admired Brahms very deeply. In fact, they knew each other personally. And the story goes that Reger one day heard a performance of Brahms's 2 clarinet sonatas, and he was so inspired by them that he said, gee, I'll write 2 sonatas just like that myself. Of course, he was being a little bit humorous, because even though superficially they sound alike, they are very, very different. So now we're going to play a little bit of the 2nd clarinet sonata of Johannes Brahms. And I will be assisted by Diego Vasquez on this. We will play a little bit of the 2nd movement, which is the equivalent of what might be called a scherzo in, say, earlier music like Beethoven, but actually is in the spirit of a Viennese waltz, but a very, very dignified, very grand, very eloquent Viennese waltz. Then we're going to play the trio section of this, which is more or less the equivalent of the musette in a gavotte. And it may sound to you almost like a Bach chorale, except it's in 3/4 time. Now, as I said earlier, when Reger heard the 2 Brahms sonatas performed, he said that he wanted to write 2 just like them. And in the second movement of his first sonata, which we're going to play on the concert, the first section is not at all like Brahms's sonata at all. It doesn't sound very, very dignified, very grandiose. It sounds almost like Johann Strauss, which is the Vienna that we associate with Viennese waltzes. However, when we get to the trio section, it sounds very much like the trio section of Brahms's second sonata, second movement, except for some very interesting twists. For example, as you'll hear, it starts off like a very dignified sort of chorale. But later on in the piece, we have a modulation that goes like, where it goes from E major to B flat. That's the relationship of a tritone. And you're probably not going to find that in much of Brahms's music. So anyway, when you listen to this, you will really appreciate the differences and the similarities between these 2 composers. And clarinetist Saram Kim will assist me in this example. And just to give you the particulars of the event, it will take place on Thursday, April 20th at 5 p.m. in Berkman Concert Hall at the Hart School. Thank you.